Okay, yeah, so my name is Iris Neymark. I'm going to be talking to you guys about product in consulting today. What I want to cover today, this is my little agenda. So I'm going to do a quick introduction and setting some context for what we're going to chat about. Then I want to spend some time talking about the difference between a product manager and a business analyst. Then the bulk of the time, I'm going to talk about product at a consulting firm, which is probably what you guys are all here for. And I want to make sure that we have a lot of time at the end for Q&A. So if you can think of questions that you have for me and write them down and keep them towards the end, that'd be great. We'll have plenty of time to do a Q&A. All right, so just want to tell you about myself. I am a product manager at Accenture. Accenture, as you probably know, is a huge company. We have 500,000 people worldwide, and we have a few different sections of the company. The section that I'm part of is called Interactive, and there's other sections such as strategy and technology and operations. So within interactive is another breakdown of sections. I'm in a pillar called build pillar. We also have other pillars called communicate pillar and run pillar. And within that, I'm in a group called digital products. So I'm going to talk about digital products in a few slides, but just wanted to give you guys a bit of an overview of how the company is broken down. We have a lot of different sections and subsections, both industry specific, function specific, etc. Specifically, what I specialize in is building engaging consumer experiences for connected products. And the reason I specialize in this, I've been on a few projects where we created a software component, usually an app, iOS, Android app, that is connected to a hardware device. That was one of my favorite projects that I was on. It was an app that was connected to the specific, I don't know if I'm allowed to say the name of the client, but I'll say the name of the product. They were these sleep buds, which are specific little earbuds that go in your ears, and they play masking sounds so that you're better able to fall asleep and stay asleep. And we were creating and designing the app that controls these sleep buds. So was on that project for almost 2 years. Really cool product, and that's just something that I'm interested in now. Besides that project that I was on in consumer electronics, I've also been on other projects in retail, in life sciences, and healthcare. So I've gotten the experience at Accenture in all these different industries, which is really good to, in my opinion, to have. And when I'm not on a project, or the time I spend outside of projects, I spend in our ERGs. These are basically clubs. So an ERG is an employee resource group. I lead our Jewish ERG for North America, which is a pretty big career milestone for me. I've been a member of the Jewish ERG, then I led our Boston location, and in November, they asked me to lead the North America and oversee all of the local leads. So it's pretty exciting to have gotten to step into this role in something that isn't specific to projects and clients, but something internal that's really important for our company culture. And we have a bunch of other ERGs. We have faith ERGs, cultural ERGs, we have sports, moms, military, and anything that you can think of. If there isn't an ERG created, you're able to start one if you'd like. And outside of work, I'm a huge foodie. I am a diehard Yelp user. I love restaurants. Now that I don't go to as many restaurants because of COVID, I love to cook, and I've picked up a bit of a new hobby with baking at home. So Always glad to talk sourdough and baked goods with anyone who's interested. And typically, I love to travel and I love exploring new places and cultures. So that's a little bit about me. And how I got there, I'm originally from Israel. I was born in a city called Haifa, and I immigrated to Boston when I was in second grade, and I have since lived in this area. I went to school in Brookline, just down the road. I went to Brookline High, and then I graduated and went to BU. I studied at, well, it was called SMG at the time, School of Management, now Questrom, although my degree does say Questrom on it. So I got a degree from Questrom, and then I also actually was a dual degree program participant. So I got a degree from CAS in economics as well. I loved BU. I lived in Warren Towers, Tower B freshman year. And then after freshman year, I always lived on Bay State Road in the Brownstones. So, highly recommend if you have a chance to live in one of the Brownstones and you're still on campus, Bay State Road on the Charles River side. Great place to live. I don't think for that dorm price you're ever going to be able to live in Back Bay. So, awesome place. And then as soon as I graduated from BU, I started working at Accenture. I've been at Accenture since. So, Accenture's actually been my only job since I graduated in 2015. So I have a lot to tell you about Accenture. Now, back to digital products, which is the group that I'm in at Accenture. Digital products is a group where we design and develop software. Digital products primarily was created out of an acquisition. Accenture acquires many different companies every year. And this acquisition was a company that was more startup-y, more of an agency that was really there to create apps for clients. So you can see on the screen some of what we do in digital products. And since it was acquired a few years ago, I switched into that group. A lot of other Accenture groups kind of formed into digital products. But what we do in digital products primarily is software design and development. And our teams consist of project managers, product managers, UX, dev, QA. So, pretty typical when you think about product management, but in terms of Accenture and consulting, not super typical, pretty new concept to folks who've been at Accenture and in consulting for a long time. All right, now we're going to move on to talking about product management versus business analysis. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because in consulting, what I've seen is that product managers are more of a new role and concept in consulting, whereas business analysts have been a consulting role for, at least my whole time at Accenture, and that's what people in consulting really understand and kind of staff that role. So when you're on a project, it's people just oftentimes assume, okay, you're the product manager, that means you're the business analyst or the product analyst. And I think it's important to understand the differentiation so that you're able to understand what kind of role you might be filling and what kind of role you need to communicate to your team you're kind of supposed to be filling. But let's get into it, and then we'll discuss this a little bit more. But I do want to talk about the difference between these two because both are present, and I've been both a product manager on a project and a business analyst. So the first difference I find between a product manager and a business analyst is who they're facing. A product manager is typically outward facing, while a business analyst is inward facing. What that means is that typically a business analyst is doing work and executing on requirements gathering behind the scenes, while a product manager is more outward facing, communicating with the client, presenting to the client, communicating with potential users, etc. So the focus between these two roles is a little bit different, and I think it's just important to keep that in mind. The next piece I want to touch on is product manager really focuses on the why of the solution, where a business analyst focuses on the how. What that means is a product manager is typically making decisions and recommendations for a feature, for a particular product decision, setting the vision, explaining why a certain feature should be done this way versus that way. And they're explaining why. Why are we giving this recommendation? Why you should do this? Why you shouldn't do that? The business analyst is typically the how of the solution. How are we going to implement this? How are we capturing this requirement? How are we going to integrate with this other system? How are we going to implement this design and hand it over to the dev team? So I think kind of similar to the first point, the product manager is thinking bigger and the business analyst is more in the day-to-day execution, which brings me to the next difference. So kind of already mentioned this, but product manager drives the vision for the product, the longer term, the roadmap, something um, over the like over the course of a week or a month or a quarter or maybe even a year, multiple years when you get to higher levels of product managers. Whereas a business analyst is really working through the day to day functional requirements, the backlog, the handoffs, kind of more of that day to day in the weeds, in the acceptance criteria, in the user stories piece. And finally, both the product manager and the business analyst write user stories. I don't think you could get away from that. You highly recommend that you guys get really good at writing user stories and being able to write them for many different audiences. I've been on projects where I'm writing user stories primarily for devs. I've also been on projects where I'm writing the user stories for dev and design and the business product owner who's reviewing the user stories. So we want to make sure that the user stories are really crisp, clean, and really anyone is able to look at them from a non-technical person, like a business stakeholder, to a very technical person and be able to understand what it is. I think in terms of what the product manager is contributing to the user story, I would say it's the higher level user story, feature, business requirement, goal, while the business analyst more likely is filling in the functional and technical details. On my past project, that's the setup we had. I would create the user story and the ticket in Jira and give a summary and write out the main goals of that story, as well as add in design links from Zeppelin. That's a system that we use. And then hand it over to the business analyst who would then fill in the gaps, really detail out the requirements, and work with the dev team to capture the technical implementation details. All right, part 3, product at a consulting firm. So the way I'm going to talk about this, because I want to be very transparent with you guys and give you an understanding of what product at a consulting firm is and is not compared to product at a product company, I'm going to present a topic and then talk about the advantages and disadvantages so that you guys are able to make your own decisions and conclusions about whether product at a consulting firm is something that would be a fit for you. If you prefer just the consulting side, if you prefer more of the traditional product side. But I'm here to tell you my experience. So that's why we're going to do it in terms of advantages and disadvantages. So the first topic is switching projects. So in my almost 6 years at Accenture, I've gotten the opportunity to be on a bunch of different projects. I have them listed over here. So this is my journey at Accenture. In black is the role that I was. In orange is the industry that this client was in, and in blue is the software that I worked on. So as you can see, a lot of different roles on a lot of different projects with a lot of different softwares. And that's been really great. The reason I went into consulting in the first place is because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do in what industry. So I've had the chance to really try a lot of different things in terms of industries and understand that, okay, I really enjoyed working on that retail client. I didn't as much enjoy working on the insurance client. I really enjoy mobile applications, not so much software that's B2B. I've also, had a chance to do project management and QA testing, which have been really informative, but also brought me to understand, what, I am more interested in the business analyst product manager route, and then became a product manager about 3 years ago at Accenture. So that's been really great, the ability to try all these different things and have the ability to switch projects. At the same time, the challenge with that is that you are sometimes assigned to projects that you are not necessarily 100% interested in. So for example, you could be assigned to a industry that you really like, but maybe the client is difficult. Or you're assigned to be a product manager, but the role was more of a scrum master, but it is a project that you're really interested in. So you might have to do that project anyway. And when it comes to consulting, we have basically the timing of when you're rolling off of a project and rolling on to the next one, it doesn't always line up exactly, right? I've been on projects that have lasted for more than a year, so they don't necessarily, that Friday that I roll off, have a project for me lined up the following Monday. That's exactly what I want. It's really demand, supply demand really plays a role here. So sometimes you're on the bench for a few weeks, and they definitely consider your preferences when it comes to what industry you're interested in, what kind of software you want to work on. But sometimes that project just isn't available, and they have to staff you because they're not just gonna keep paying you to sit on the bench. So that's definitely a challenge. So something to consider. All right, the next one is with the ability to switch to different projects, you also have the ability to wear different hats and try new things, which is really exciting. So as I mentioned, I've gotten to be a QA person, a project management analyst, and on each project where I've been a BA or a product manager, I've had some or all of these responsibilities, which I've really enjoyed. On my past project, I particularly enjoyed coordinating user testing. That was really cool. Watching people walk through our prototype on video and hearing their reactions. That's something I really enjoyed. I also really love working with our designers, the UX team, and reviewing designs and giving feedback. That's something I really like to do. And I like working with the dev teams. The depth of which I work with the dev team really depends on whether the dev team is an Accenture dev team, or sometimes the client will hire a different dev team or have a mixed team. So that depends. But I've, had the chance to do these responsibilities, which you would typically see a product manager doing, as well as some other responsibilities that might not necessarily be product responsibilities, but something I've been able to kind of say, hey, you know what, I'm interested in doing this thing. And then I'm able to be a participant or help out with it. With that, what I haven't had a chance to do as much of is some of these responsibilities that you would typically see a product manager doing. Because we are working for our clients typically have a product manager or owner on their side who are more involved in the longer term vision, the longer term roadmap building, the actual marketing and planning for launch. I've definitely done all of these things, but probably not to the point that a product manager at a product company would be doing. So that's, something to consider. As I mentioned, am definitely interested in user testing and had a lot of fun doing that. And, I have had the chance to do that, but that's not something that happens on every project and really has to be approved by the clients, because they are paying for that effort and whatnot. So, just something that I, as a stand in product manager, can't say, hey, we have to do this and we have to do this market research now. That's usually more done on the client side. And then another challenge, and why I had talked about business analysts versus product managers, is that the line between a BA and a product manager is a little murky, because in consulting, just the nature of us doing work for our clients and really being in the day to day and executing, oftentimes I've been called a product manager, but have been executing a lot of BA tasks and being more in the weeds. We don't, on our teams, always have the ability to have product managers and business analysts, or more than one person on the product team at all. So it's typically the product manager is doing the product management tasks, but also, the BA task, and probably more in the weeds than you would expect a product manager to be. The next item is the ownership and responsibility. This one's kind of nice, that, of course we want to try hard and do our best on a project and a product, but at the end of the day, the responsibility of this project or product that we're working on falls on the client. So we are always there to make a recommendation, and the best possible recommendation backed by our experience as Accenture, drawing from other experts and SMEs in our practice. But sometimes the client, will make a different decision or not agree with the recommendation. And if that doesn't go so well, the responsibility still falls on the client. They're the ones producing the product, and their name is attached to it. So from a personal level, that kind of eases the intensity of feeling like, oh man, I need this product to succeed. But I do want to try hard and feel like I'm owning the product and doing the best for the product as if it's mine, which kind of brings me to the challenge, which you are, as a product manager in consulting, you are standing in for your client. You are executing on their behalf. At the end of the day, you don't own that product and you don't have as much, investment in it. I mean, so it's always, you're tiptoeing the line between, okay, I want to care enough that I do my best work, but not too much, because this isn't something that I am personally responsible for in launching. I'm really handing this over to the client, and they're the ones that are then launching it, marketing it, doing whatever they want with it. So that's a challenge that I've had. Also, if you're assigned to a project or product that you're not particularly interested in, it's hard to, want to own it as much as possible. So that's just something to consider, that if you're working for a product company where there's a product that you really, really believe in, that's a huge driver. That's, passion about a product is really huge, and something that I would prefer to have. But, sometimes you just end up on a project and it's not the most exciting product. And just, yeah, another thing to consider. And the last piece is the advantage of working at a large firm. So I've been at Accenture for a long time. There's a lot of advantages of being at a large firm, from the perks to when we were in person, we had all these events and happy hours and the ability to switch projects. Also, luckily, because my because Accenture's clientele is very differentiated, I wasn't that worried about a year ago when some of my friends started, getting furloughed. I had that job security, which was really nice, as opposed to if I had been working at a startup, for instance. So, there's definitely the security and also the fun of working at a large firm, that I enjoy. And a challenge not really related to the large firm, but just related to working for clients, is that a lot of the time that I spend at work is prepping for client meetings. So if you're working at a product company, you'd likely be prepping for a meeting and then having the meeting. Whereas at Accenture, because we're client facing, we need to be polished, professional. We have a client prep meeting, then we have the meeting with the client, and then we'll likely have another meeting or set of meetings to incorporate the edits and all of that. So there's just that extra prep and overhead, and time and effort spent polishing everything and really coming off as the professionals and the experts and the consultants. Um, and a lot of upskilling with that, having to work on different industries, projects. You have to become an expert pretty quick so that your client doesn't see you as, who's this person on this project? They don't know anything about my industry. So there's just a lot of effort that goes into coming off the right way for the client. So with that, I think we're done with the lecture portion of the presentation, and I want to look at your faces now and answer your questions. So let me stop sharing.
Thank you so much for that. I have one question. When you mentioned about your responsibilities that you get to work with design teams, also the business aspect of things, did you find yourself leaning more towards one side of the spectrum, like oh, more to like UX or more to like business, or did it depend on like what kind of project you were working on?
So let me just ask a question to clarify what you'd like me to answer. So, what do you mean by like business versus UX? Like, are you asking whether I work more with like the client and business side or the UX side, or which one I prefer? Or maybe if you can clarify, so I'm answering
Oh
the
yeah,
right.
so like which one did you prefer working on? Did you prefer working on more on the UX decisions, UX testing, or did you prefer working more on like the business side of the business analytics with the client?
So I'd actually say that that's okay. That's an interesting question because I always see it as, in consulting, the business is the client. So any time that we spend working with the business, we're not so much workshopping, we're more presenting to them. So I personally see it as like, do I work more with UX versus dev, because day to day, that's who I work most with. And with the client, it's more a presentation style. I mean, we do, of course, have design thinking and ideation in the beginning, and throughout, to make sure that we're working on the right stuff and prioritizing the backlog correctly, etc. Um, but they're really handing it off to us, and then we're doing our thing and then coming back. But what I've learned about myself is that I really do enjoy working with UX. I came into Accenture as a technology analyst, primarily working with devs. And I've learned that I actually really enjoy the UX side and working with designers and seeing how those decisions are made. I'm on an internal project right now, and they were presenting mood boards, which surprisingly was the first time that I'd actually been in a mood board presentation. I guess I just hadn't been in that part of the process, but it was so cool. We got to vote on 3 different mood boards and like hear why these decisions were being made, why certain fonts are better suited than others. So yeah, I think the UX side has been really, really interesting for me.
Questions from the e-board.
Yeah, it can be about anything. You guys can ask me what my favorite food is. No, I'm kidding. But I mean, I'm here to answer your questions.
I have a question. Did you start at Accenture as a program manager from the beginning, or did you start and then transition? And if yes, how was that transition?
So when you graduate from college and then start at Accenture, you start in a program called CDP or IDP, but it's a development program. So you start as an analyst, and your level, it's a level 11. We have like level 11, and then it goes up to level 1, who's like the CEO basically. But you start as an analyst and you start general in the CDP program. And with that, you're able to be on different projects. So hence the QA tester role I was on, the project management role I was on, I was staffed as an analyst in those roles. And then once you get promoted to consultant, which is a CL9, that's 2 levels. So you go analyst, senior analyst, and then consultant. Then you choose your specialty. So, but I've done a few switches, to be honest. So I chose to be in management consulting, and specifically in product industry, not product management, but product industry, which is like consumer goods and services, retail, things like that. And then I was, learned about this like BA and then product management, and about this group that I'm in, digital products. And at that point, I switched over because after 3 years or so, I finally realized, okay, I really like being in the middle of business, design, and dev. I really like that. And then I switched and have been in the digital products group since. So hopefully that answers your question. Let me know if there's something to clarify.
No, yeah, I was very curious about like because I was very interesting before I switched to product management. I was certain that I wanted to do consulting, so I was very curious on how did you transition, but you definitely answered. Thank you.
Okay, awesome.
So there's a question in the chat that says from Radhe, what classes at BU helped in prepping you for the PM role and the consulting role as well?
Okay, that's funny because I'll tell you guys how I switched into product management. So I was on the bench 3 years ago. Do you guys know what the bench is, or should I clarify? I'm going to clarify. So in consulting, when you're not on a project, you are on what's called the bench. Some companies call it the beach because you're chilling on the beach. but it's time that you're not staffed a project, right? Which happens because you might not be like, as I said, rolling off of a project Friday, rolling on to a project Monday. So you're on the bench, and what you're expected to do at that time is do different trainings and help out with BD work in the digital products group that I'm in now. This is a bit of a tangent, but they are very particular about having people still do projects while on the bench. So I'm on this cool project right now, internal, but it's about responsible UX and thinking about the effects of right now our prototype is it's a streaming service, and thinking about how to be responsible and prevent people from binge watching shows. Anyway, that's a tangent, but so 3 years ago when I was on the bench, I was looking for a project, and someone from, I didn't even know digital products was a thing at the time, they reached out to me and they're like, hey, we noticed you were a BA on your previous role, we see that you're good at like user stories, requirements, working with devs, et cetera, et cetera. We have a product manager role for you. And I was like, great. And to myself, I thought, what's a product manager? Because it just wasn't a thing at Accenture that I'd ever known about. So in terms of what did I learn at BU about product management, I didn't even know that was a thing. But I think I got a concentration in international management. So I don't know if that's like an option anymore. I don't think we had a strategy concentration back then, or maybe we did, but that might have been helpful, some strategy classes, because I remember I did a strategy course which did help me with, to be honest, I think BU just does such a great job. I love the curriculum and I love how um, each business class builds on itself. So I think just my studies at Questrom really, really helped me. Just be ready to have the analytical mind that is required to be in consulting. So majors like engineering and business, and any major which really teaches you to like think critically and pay attention to details on a project is helpful. And as I mentioned, because I've been on a bunch of different projects and industries, just trying a lot of new things and having skills in all of those has been helpful for me. So my resume of internships going into applying for jobs, like I had worked at a dental office, I had worked at a lab, I had worked at a camp, I had worked for a defense contractor. So just having that wide range of experience, I think, is great for consulting. Whereas for something really, really specific, like if you want to be a mechanical engineer and you worked at a dental office as a front desk person, like that wouldn't make so much sense. So that's my take on that. Trying as much as possible, because you're going to be introduced to different environments, different clients, different teams. I think that helped me. Any other questions? I know you guys all want to go to dinner.
I have two questions. One is more of a fun question. As a designer, do you happen to have a favorite font by any chance, or?
So I'm not a designer, so I actually, don't know too much about fonts, but the font that we've been using for decks and that I used for this deck is Graphic, and I do like that font. It's a nice font, but I learned about like 4 new fonts today, so let me get back to you on that.
No worries. And then my other question is, so I participated in the Accenture Innovation Challenge, like I think it was like last week or something. I didn't get past the first round, but I was just wondering, in terms of like recruitment and just going into the internship season as well as job applications, what is something, just because you mentioned how there's so many different ways to get involved at Accenture, as a product manager or as a designer, consultant, there are multiple paths. And I was wondering, what are some ways for us as students right now to, be able to stand out a little bit more? Or, is there, who's the best way, like what is the best way to really, get our foot in the door? I know it's a, a tough question.
That's a tough question to answer, because I guess with like Accenture aside, whenever you're applying for a job and they take you or they don't take you, you don't really know why. So it's hard to be like, oh, this is what we're looking for and this isn't what we're looking for. So I think that might more be a question for some of the great, I mean, we also have recruiting from Accenture at BU, which is great. So like that's amazing that that's an option, because that's already a foot in the door. So you're already more likely to be considered. And then there's, interview prep and getting really good at like cases. But I think if you are interested in well, as I mentioned, I think one, showing a wide range of experience and interest. Because if you say, hey, I only want to work with healthcare clients and I'm only interested in healthcare, then it's a little harder to staff you, right? So they're going to be like, well, maybe they should just go work for a healthcare company. So I think, when you're like applying to college, you're like, I don't want to be undeclared. Like, I don't want to choose later. But actually in consulting, I feel like it's kind of better. You're like, yeah, I'm down to explore a bunch of different industries. Here's my resume with all the different stuff I've already done. I know how to talk to a lot of different people. So, I think there's a lot. I think to focus, one is the wide range of experience. So as you're doing internships, I mean, you can do a consulting internship, but also if you have opportunities to do a few internships, if they're in different industries and different types of work, I think that's helpful. Two, if you're serious about product management, get really good at writing user stories and be able to talk about that. And three, there's usually a case study component to interviews. So I think getting good at that is important. Just being reactive and analytical in new scenarios is something that you'd want to practice. I know that didn't answer your question 100%, but I think that's what I can provide today. Did we have any more chat? Strategy for tech firms. That's cool. There's so many more classes now than we had when I was in college, which only seems like a few years ago, but I guess it was a while. Do we want to do like one more question? I'm taking it right now. Okay. What are you guys covering? Anything do you guys know a professor called Gene Cornfield at SMG at Questrom? No, okay. He teaches a class called Digital like something, and I'm gonna be helping out with one of his classes next week. So I was wondering if any of you guys might be in it. Actually, you know what? No, it's an MBA class, so never mind. That's probably why none of us have heard of it.
What class is it? We have a few MBAs who are in our Slack group.
Oh, yes, sorry, you didn't mention that. Let me take a look at my Teams chat and tell you what it's called. It is, hold on 1 second. No, it just says Jean's MBA class. Anyway, I think it's like a digital innovation product something. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact name, but yeah.
Any last questions from anyone? Anything at all? Oh,
You
I do have
guys,
one question I forgot. At Accenture, I've heard that it's like 75% travel or something. Have you also had to travel a lot for the role?
no, so, well, I guess right now not a lot of people are traveling, but I was mentioning earlier that I've actually been able to not have a Monday through Thursday travel project during my whole time. So I've been mostly local on projects, and I've had to drive to like, the suburbs in Massachusetts. So I'd go there Monday through Thursday, for example, and I did that for a few years. And then I was mentioning that I was on a project where the client was in Toronto, so we got to fly over there once a month to do product demos at the end of the sprint, which was fun. And then I've had one remote project where I worked from home, which I do not recommend, but I guess now everyone's working from home, so it is what it is. But yeah, I'm one of the few actually. I think I like specifically did not want to, so I always tried to get a local project. But I'd probably be more open to it now. So it depends. But 75%, that's an interesting metric. I believe it. All right. Well, if you guys do end up having any questions, I am in the Slack instance, so you can message me there. Feel free to do that. I will respond. I'm not scary. And yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed chatting with you guys, and I hope you have a great weekend. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much for coming and for giving us this presentation. It was awesome learning about those two areas. Um, and everyone else, for next week, we're also going to have another workshop. I believe next week it's March. What day is it next week? March 4th. We're going to have another event. The topic is still to be determined, but we'll send it out to the Slack and everything. Iris, thank you so much. It was a pleasure meeting you. And thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks, guys.
All right, bye, everyone.
Bye.